joining us. And thank you for the introduction. As you say, my name is Henrietta Burley. I'm the Director of Policy and Strategic Relationships at the Greater Birmingham Chambers of Commerce. And what I'm going to do this morning is talk you through some need-to-know information on the Coronavirus Business Grant Fund. First up is a bit of background. What are the Chambers? Well, we're a not-for-profit business membership and business support organisation, and we've been in business for business since 1813. So it's safe to say the organisation's seen a crisis or two. And today's chamber is all about helping export and grow businesses in the Greater Birmingham area. We've got around 100 members of staff helping businesses with everything from trading internationally to finding customers locally. And as I'm sure you can imagine, supporting businesses through coronavirus, helping them navigate government support, has been a top area for us. You can find out more about that at greaterbirminghamchambers.com/coronavirus. But on to the Coronavirus Small Business Grant Fund. Well, as some high-level stats for you, there's around 900,000 residents in England alone who will qualify for small business rate relief and therefore qualify for these grants. There are £10,000 one-off cash grants available to each premises receiving small business rate relief. And in total, across all of the grant schemes that the government have announced to date, so including the Retail, Leisure and Hospitality Grant, there's a funding pool of about £12 billion available for businesses. One to note, what I'm going to talk you through this morning is the correct information for businesses in England. However, devolved nations have their own slightly different policies around sort of thresholds for receiving small business rate relief in these grants. So if you are based in Northern Ireland, Scotland, Wales, do check the information available from your devolved governments that may be slightly different. So on to the grants. Well, as mentioned, what are the grants? There are £10,000 one-off grant payment to each applicable business. The grants for businesses who are in receipt of small business rates relief or rural rates relief as of the 11th of March 2020. And that 11th of March date is really important. That's the rating list that local authorities will be basing these grant applications off of. To qualify for small business rate relief, businesses need to have a rateable value of under £15,000. And this is really important. It's something that businesses have to have applied for. It's not applied automatically. We'll come back to that in a second. Eligible recipients will receive one grant per property. This is based on herediments rather than businesses. You cannot access these grants if your business was in liquidation or dissolved at the 11th of March, or for properties that are occupied for personal use, like private stables, loose boxes, beach huts, moorings, and also car parks or parking spaces. So when it comes to who's actually paying out these grants, it's your local authority. The government have issued the funding pool, divided up between the local authorities, and it will be the local authorities themselves that are funding these, sending these out to businesses in their area. Apologies, I've got a cat attacking my leg there. Joys of working from home. Local authorities will pay the grant to the ratepayer as appears on their records from the 11th of March. So that's really important. The contact that they have on their database as the ratepayer will be who they get in touch with, and it'll be their business bank accounts that the grant is paid into. When will you receive the grants? Well, local authorities have already begun making payments to businesses that they have complete records for, but the full process is likely to take a few weeks. And that's because local authorities do not have complete records and business bank account details for all applicable ratepayers. You know, some people receiving complete small business rates relief are receiving 100% relief. So there's been no payment made, they don't have their bank details, or they might, for instance, have paid by cheque in the past. So it is really important that if you think you qualify for this grant, you check your local authority's website, as most of online forms that you submit your details to. So even if they may or may not have your business bank account details, do this anyway, just in case. It will help speed up the process later on. If you don't know if your business receives small business rates relief, you can always do a quick calculation to check your rateable value. I've included a link to a business rates calculator there, but you can just find one on Google and speak to colleagues within your business to understand if you've successfully applied for small business rates relief in the past. As I say, this is something that you need to have applied for. It wasn't applied automatically. You could also, if you have it to hand, check your most recent rates bill. If you're unable to find out internally, then that's when you can contact your local authority. But bear in mind, they will be receiving a lot of queries about this at this time, so may not respond incredibly quickly. If you were not receiving small business rates relief at the 11th of March 2020, but think you should have been, It is worth remembering that the criteria is quite strict. Grants are based on the rateable value and rating assessment as of the 11th of March 2020 only. But within the guidance issued to local authorities, there is something stating that where there is a clear error on the rating list, local authorities may, at their discretion, withhold the grant and or award the grant based on their view of which businesses should receive them. So we're still waiting to see how local authorities will apply this in practice. This is brand new. A lot of them haven't worked out the exact criteria for how they'll manage this. So if you think there is a clear error with the way your business is described on the rating list, then do contact your local authorities to see what can be done. This one is quite a common one. What if my landlord pays business rates? A lot of small businesses, maybe in serviced offices or maybe in units where they pay their rent to the landlord and the landlord is responsible for the business rate bill. In that case, it is worth bearing in mind these grants are for the ratepayers, so you may not qualify. Speak to your landlord to understand their approach. Worth bearing in mind as well that state aid rules apply for businesses who are in receipt of small business rates relief. State aid limits remain at a maximum of €200,000 over the current and previous 2 financial years. So that's any support you'll have received from the state in terms of tax reliefs and grants up to €200,000 over the current and previous 2 financial years. You may also have heard about grants of £25,000. Those are for business rates payers in the retail, leisure and hospitality sector. They have a rateable value of over £15,000 but less than £51,000. Any businesses in that sector with the under £15,000 rateable value will receive the £10,000 grant. So that's who those £25,000 grants are for. There is existing other support. A lot of grant programs have recently been tied to business growth, which is obviously not what a lot of people are looking at the moment, but it is always worth speaking to your local enterprise partnership growth hub to understand the support programs and grants that are available in your area. Again, hop on Google, look for your local enterprise partnership growth hub in your area. They are always worth speaking to. So that's about it on the grant scheme itself. You may, of course, be aware of lots of other government support that's available. I'm not here to talk about it in detail today, but as a summary, there's the Coronavirus Job Retention Scheme, which is the 80% of salary up to £2,500 per month per employee that's furloughed. The web portal for that isn't up and running just yet. HMRC are aiming to open it by the end of the month, but you can furlough employees now and then backdate your claims to get the payments through once that's up and running. There's the Coronavirus Business Interruption Loans available from high street banks. The Self-Employed Income Support Scheme, which provides up to 80% of average monthly profits for self-employed people, averaged over the last couple of years. Business rates holiday for retail, leisure and hospitality sector, and also nurseries. Extension of time to pay facilities. So if you're struggling to pay your tax bill, call up HMRC and they'll put together a payment plan to try and sort of spread that load and make it a bit easier for you to pay. VAT deferral, that's already in place, so that's VAT deferred for this quarter, still payable at a later date, but not payable at this quarter to save a bit of money in bank accounts. There's a statutory sick pay rebate, which again isn't quite up and running yet, but you can backdate payments for once it is, which is to refund businesses with under 250 employees, anything they've been paying out in statutory sick pay. Deferral of self-assessment payments for self-employed people. The COVID-19 corporate financing facility for the biggest businesses. And then finally, there's also a moratorium on evictions for late payments. So any business that is unable to pay their rent cannot be evicted by their landlord until June. So those are the main areas of support available. For more information on those, you can go to www.businesssupport.gov.uk/coronavirus-business-support. Now, there are some gaps in this support. One of the most obvious ones for the grant scheme being businesses that don't pay business rates directly, but pay rent and a service charge or just rent to their landlord, and their landlord handles the rates bill. And there are a number of other gaps as well, including for self-employed people paying themselves through dividends, etc. And we know there are a lot of businesses who are facing hardship because they cannot access the support as it's been announced so far. We're continuing to work hard to lobby the government and local stakeholders to fill these gaps and ensure that cash reaches businesses urgently. As I say, a lot of the schemes that will be great once they're up and running are yet to be live and making payments, such as the scheme around furloughing employees. So it's really critical that those schemes get up and running as quickly as possible, so that money can make it to the businesses that need it. If you're in a difficult situation because you're falling through the gaps in the currently available support, Please do send us a case study at kbm@birmingham-chamber.com. We're undertaking a significant stakeholder engagement and lobbying campaign at the moment. And case studies showing what this looks like for individual businesses and the consequences for them are really powerful in getting across the key messages of where the gaps are and what the consequences of these gaps are. So that's about it for me. My final takeaway message when it comes to the grant is if your business is in receipt of small business rates relief, make sure you check your local authority's website. You may need to submit your business bank account details and other information in order to receive your grant. So that's it from me. As I say, there's information on the email address to contact us and the website for further support. I'm going to stop sharing now and get back to Q&A.
Perfect, Henrietta. Thank you very much for that. That's very kind and very informative to share that with everyone. I know that we have quite a few questions now on what you spoke about. So if you're ready, I'll open the floor up to some questions and then.
I will do my best to answer. As I say, this is all very new, so there may be a few areas where we're still waiting to see what the precedent is, but I will do my best to answer whatever you got. Very kind.
We have a question here from ARB Automation asking the documentation that will need to be submitted. Can you speak to that?
That's one where check your local authority website. They're generally asking for sort of consistent information on property, on the ratepayer, on business bank account details. There may be slight variations depending on the area. So take a look at your local authority's website to find what most of them have, which is an online form.
Excellent, thank you. We have another question here. About furloughing. I'm not sure if you'll be able to. Oh, this is a question about a grant. So it's from Ian, who runs a small nursery school. The government will still pay the free entitlement, but this will not be enough to cover the wages for the next term, as that is supplemented by fees paid by parents for extra hours for children under 3 years old. If I furlough my staff, should I keep paying them, and at what point can I claim the grant? So I'm not sure if you can speak to the furloughing, but can you speak potentially to the grant?
Yeah, so I can speak to the grant side, which is HMRC are hoping to have their portal up and running in the next couple of weeks, at which point businesses will be able to apply to get the money paid back. But truth of the matter is that's probably a few weeks off yet. I have to admit, I'm not an employment lawyer, so I can't advise on the do's and don'ts around continuing to pay staff. Most businesses I speak to are finding ways to continue to pay their staff during this period, as obviously they still have their bills to pay and they're still technically employed by the organisation, even if furloughed, and then looking to claim back the money paid once the HMRC support is up and running.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And I think, Ian, if you have an accountant, I think that they would be certainly potentially able to advise you on what the best way to keep paying your staff is. They should be keeping themselves apprised of the latest developments on the furloughing. So let's just see here. We have a question here from Simon, who has just completed his first year as a limited company, having previously been self-employed. And he's wondering whether he is classed as self-employed or as a limited company in terms of grants, even though my limited company has yet to file its first year's accounts.
Oh, that is a good question. So the grants are tied to business rates. That's the thing to remember there. So if you're a business ratepayer and you're receiving small business rate relief, then those grants will apply to you. In terms of operating as a limited company, so you're no longer self-employed, so the self-employed support won't be open to you. It's most likely that the best support available to you will be around furloughing. Depending on whether you employ people or you're self-employed, I think there has been some new guidance issued that you can furlough as a director, you can furlough yourself and have 80% of your salary covered and still be able to complete your director's duties, your legal duties as a director, just no other work for the organisation. That's one of the criteria around furloughing. The individuals who are furloughed cannot do any work for your organisation unless they're an executive director who have official duties to complete. So it may be if you pay yourself through dividends, so you're one of those individuals who will fall through the gaps in the current support, as that is an area where we're seeing there isn't currently support available for directors who have their company set up in that way and pay themselves in that way. So yeah, I think that's where you'd currently stand, depending on where you fit into those.
Okay, thank you very much. We have another question from Simon, who is asking if it's just, he's asking if you said it's one grant per property. He's in a shared building with 4 small businesses in it.
It's per herediment. So some businesses are in bigger properties, but for the purposes of business rates and the fact that they're occupied by multiple small businesses, they have split that business up into smaller herediments for the purpose of paying business rates. But from the sounds of it, if you're in a shared business with a shared building with 4 businesses, it will be whoever the ratepayer is for that property who will receive the grant if the total value is low enough and if you're receiving small business rates relief. So it's finding out who the ratepayer is really key.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Henrietta. We have another question here. I'm not sure I'm understanding it correctly. Is the grant of 10,000 including accountants' offices?
Again, if you mean in terms of physically, can accountants' offices receive this grant? It's not industry specific. It is just about whether you receive small business rates relief. So if your property does, if you're a rates payer and you've successfully applied for small business rates relief, then yes, regardless of your sector, the £25,000 grant is the one that's just for retail, leisure, and hospitality businesses.
Okay, thank you, Henrietta. I think that potentially does answer this next question as well. So we have a question here from Keith asking if Airbnb businesses are eligible. So I guess, again, if you're
comes down to business rates, being a ratepayer and receiving small business rate relief.
Great. We have another question here from Lester asking if the landlord of the service office is getting a grant. Given we pay rent, do you think the grant should be passed on to the tenants proportionately?
That's a matter for you to pick up with individual landlords. The terms of the grant are very much, it goes to the ratepayer. It's also worth bearing in mind that depending on the setup of the business, the landlord might not be receiving the grant either. So I spoke to a landlord the other day who hadn't split their building up into smaller herediments, so they don't qualify for small business rate relief. And they were actually quite irritated because they were hoping to get grants through to help their tenants, to make sure their tenants are still there when this is through. But it's in that case, speak to your landlord, understand their approach, bear in mind that they might not be receiving a grant either.
Fair enough. Thank you, Henrietta. We have another question here from Rufus asking what, or perhaps I think people maybe don't understand what grants are, asking what are the terms of the grant, interest and payment terms. So
yeah, it's just a one-off lump sum grant. So there's no repayment. It's a grant. It's money for you. And that's kind of it. It hits your bank account, and then it's for businesses to use to keep them going in this period. It's a relatively straightforward one, I have to say. There are of course issues with it being attached to small business rates relief, as I say, around what businesses do and don't qualify. But the plus side of it has been that local authorities are able to allocate these grants relatively quickly, because they've already got a list of people who basically fit the criteria. So the criteria is receiving small business rate relief, then you receive a £10,000 grant. So it's relatively simple and straightforward for businesses to navigate.
So their money is received, which are not loans, not on commercial terms. Do they count as income, or no? It's just a cash payment.
Yeah, as I understand it, so I've been looking for further information on whether the grant's taxable, and there's no guidance from the government. There's nothing that I've been able to find from anywhere to date, which suggests to me that, like a lot of grants, this will be a tax-free grant. But as I say, that's due to a lack of information rather than confirmation that that will be the case, if that makes sense.
Excellent. So everyone needs to check whether that is going to be taxable or not if you do receive one. We have another question here from Mitchell asking if I have a direct debit set up to pay business rates, will they make the payment through this method?
Again, it's worth just filling in the form on the local authority website. They will be making transfers to business bank accounts, but it is just worth completing your details there to make absolutely sure that they've got the correct information for your business, even if you paid by direct debit previously.
Okay, great. So we're just answering the questions in the comments first, and then we're going to move to the questions in the question scheme. We have a question speaking to that. We have another question here. I just want to try and address all the questions if possible. As a shareholder of my husband's limited company, can I be furloughed and received 80% SE payments? I'm not sure what SE payments refers to.
Yeah, I'm going to have to duck out of this one, I'm afraid, because that's probably more of a question for an accountant or an employment lawyer, but worth looking into. Because as I say, new guidance has been issued around directors being furloughed and still being able to complete directors' duties.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So let's move on to the questions here. We'll pick up all the questions, or every question will get answered if we have time. So we have a question here asking about mixed-use buildings. We have production and council licensed retail on site. The building is primarily classed for production. Does the council have discretion to approve us for the retail grant?
Oh, that is a good question. It does depend what you're classified on the 11th of March rating list as what the sort of purpose of the herediment is, the primary purpose of it. So if you can find that out, that will give you an answer. And if you think you have a strong case to argue that you are in fact retail, if there is a genuine case there, then you could always look at that piece around local authorities being able to make discretionary judgments if there's a clear error in the rating list. So worth contacting your local authority, finding out what you're classified as, and if, as I say, you genuinely are a retail business, worth putting forward that that's an error and should be corrected to the proper use of the herediment.
Okay, thank you for that, Henrietta. We have another question here asking, and I think this is a question that a lot of people have. There are some gaps in some of these schemes, obviously. Why is there nothing for businesses that operate from home? We have contractor staff who run a seasonal business with no need for offices, and we work at events. Our business has been totally wiped out for the first half of the upcoming season. And because we don't have an office, we've fallen through the gaps. Is there a plan to address this?
Yep, I absolutely agree. Like I said in the presentation, we know this is a really, really big gap, and there are a lot of businesses that aren't receiving these grants that could really need them, and are in sectors that have been immediately impacted by coronavirus and the measures that have been put in place. What I will say is we're continuing to lobby for it. The government do seem to be receptive to filling the gaps. There were the announcements on the business interruption loan scheme last week after lobbying behind the scenes of them not getting to enough businesses. So we're continuing to raise those and hope to see something in future. But as it stands, I feel your pain. That's a really difficult place that a lot of businesses are in, where they're just not qualifying for the currently available support.
Excellent. Well, that is, appreciate your answer on that. And obviously everyone's making the utmost effort to try and address these issues. Obviously it's a very novel situation, and we're all sort of exploring this for the first time, I suppose, really. We're getting a question here about furloughing, and I'm afraid this is a question that you're going to have to ask your accountant. Those questions are, I'm afraid, not something we can speak to in this current session. So we have another question here about grants available for small manufacturers who supply food service companies like airlines who are not operating. Are grants available for companies like that?
Again, the grant schemes that have announced are just the ones that are attached to business rates. So small business rates relief or retail, leisure, hospitality sector up to a rateable value of 51k. So if you qualify within that, if your rateable value puts you under small business rates relief and you've applied for it previously, then yes, but there's nothing specific for supply chain companies at the moment. Again, it's another area we're raising is obviously retail, leisure and hospitality. We're at the very front end of the impact of coronavirus, but now their whole supply chains are being very badly impacted as a result. So needing to broaden out that support for companies. But as it stands at the moment, the coronavirus specific support when it comes to grants is small business rates relief, retail, leisure and hospitality with a rateable value of under 51k.
Okay. Thank you, Henrietta. We have a question here from Chris. Chris, I think we've sort of spoken to this. When are they going to be paid? And do they need to be paid back? Certainly, they do not need to be paid back. And Henrietta, I know you've spoken to this, but can you just clarify again when they will actually be dispersed after application?
So they're starting now. The idea behind it is you technically don't have to apply. The government have the local government have the list of people who receive small business rates relief, but because they don't have complete details for everyone, that's why every business that thinks they could get it should go and complete those online forms to speed up that process, so you don't find out in sort of 2 months' time you're still waiting for your grant. Making sure they have that information as soon as possible. So some payments have started being made now for those companies that local authorities have complete records for, and they'll continue to come through in the coming weeks. Obviously, bigger local authorities will have a bigger number of ratepayers to get through, whereas smaller local authorities may be able to work through theirs much quicker. So it's sort of any day now if they do have your full details. But regardless, like I say, it's well worth, if you receive some business rates relief, hopping onto your local authority's website and completing that online form.
Excellent. That is good advice. We have another question here from David, asking what happens if we take the grant and still go bust. Is the liability on the director, shareholders, or does it stop if the company closes? So there is no liability. It is a grant.
Yeah, I've not seen anything. I've been having lots of fun reading all the government guidance. I've not seen anything to suggest that that would be repayable if the business goes bust. It's very much a one-off grant for businesses that qualify based on business rates relief, rural rates relief, etc. And then it's up to the business to use it as they see fit. And if they do go bust at a later date, I've yet to see anything that suggests they need to be repaid.
Excellent. Jayesh, I think that's, obviously we're in uncharted waters here, and these are efforts to try and help people, not go bust, obviously, but understand that we are all facing very challenging trading environments, and that's why these schemes are being put in place. There's a question here about what is the process for applying for the retail, hospitality, and leisure grant. We have 4 stores with rateable values under 51,000. And one with rateable value below 15,000, all in central London. So you did speak to that. You apply via the website.
Yeah, same again. And as I say, it's not really applying. So the local authority have the details of businesses that they believe qualify. Okay. The going to the website is just making sure that they've got your up-to-date details as quickly as possible, so you can get the grant as quickly as possible. And like I say, you don't find out in a couple of months' time that they've been trying to get hold of you and the grant has been paid. So same again for the 25k grant, getting onto the local authority's website. And as I say, the 25k is just for businesses, for residents, I should say, who are in the retail, leisure, hospitality sector with a rateable value of between 15k and 51k. Those in those sectors with a rateable value of below 15k, that's where the 10k grant comes into play again.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. We have another question from David asking, we rent a virtual office and pay no business rates. Is anything available to us? It doesn't tell you what there is at the moment, but...
Yeah, with the grants, no, but obviously things like the furloughing scheme or self-employed schemes, look at those, because those are other schemes that may apply.
Excellent. We have another question here from Sarah asking any tips for people in serviced offices when we can't get into them. I don't know if that question is about whether you can apply for a grant if you are paying rates. I think Henrietta did say if you are paying rates, you have to speak to your individual landlord. Is that correct?
Yeah, if you're not paying business rates directly and you're paying to a landlord, it's whoever is the responsible ratepayer who receives the grant. Again, assuming that they have split the property into small enough arreardments to receive some business rate relief. So do speak to your landlord to understand what the situation is there.
Excellent, thank you. We've got a question here from Jamie about furloughing directors of a limited company. Jamie, I think that you need to speak to your accountant about that. We have another question here from Elliot. We are a non-profit based in Islington. We have a landlord to whom we pay rent. Do we qualify for the business grant? Again,
yeah, same applies. It's the business rate payer and those who are receiving small business rate relief, rural rate relief, or in the retail, leisure and hospitality sector.
Okay, this is a question that you might have already answered. Apologies if you have. Victor, please clarify. I currently receive 100% business rate relief. Will I still qualify to apply for the grant? But there is no application.
Yeah, and if that relief is small business rates relief that you're receiving, then yes, absolutely.
Great. Sorry. So we have another question here from Hansel. If my council says they will identify grant qualifying businesses automatically and contact us, but we have closed for business now, how, when would we find out? Do we need to contact the council?
Again, that's why it's best, even if the council do have all your details, to look at websites, complete the online form to make sure that they've got the right contact details, because they will contact the individual listed as the ratepayer. Depending on what contact details they have, that could be email, could be letter, and obviously lots of people aren't in their premises at the moment, so letter can be quite tricky. So do make sure that you've completed that online form to make sure they've got the right details.
Okay. We have a question here from Chris that maybe you can speak to, asking they've just accessed the form from their council, and it asks for the date of the last rate payment when one has not been made. I'm assuming because of the interruption currently going on, and I feel it's a bit of a trap, so wonder what I should enter here, as you can only you have to put a date in.
If there's an option to sort of send an email to an info at or query the local authority, get in touch that way, because obviously there will be some people who are in particular circumstances which will make that difficult to answer, but talk to your local authority and they'll be able to confirm.
And there's a list of companies that do qualify for this on each local authority website?
There's not a list of the individual companies, but it is very much that simple criteria: the small business rate relief, businesses that are in receipt of that, retail, leisure, hospitality, up to the rateable value of 51k. If you fall into those, fill in that online form, and then the local authority should have your most up-to-date details as quickly as possible.
Excellent. Apparently on the application form they ask for a business rates account number, but Victoria says she has two reference numbers, one of which is a business rates account number and the other one is a property reference. Do you know which one should be used?
Well, if they've asked for the business rates account number, use the business rates account number. I may have misheard the question there, but try and match that to whatever they've asked for. And if it is unclear, then again, drop an email to your local authority and see if you can get an answer, or pick up the phone and give them a call, maybe better.
Yes, perfect. We have one other question here. We have two retail premises which are car showrooms under one company. Do we receive two grants?
If they are listed separately in terms of business rates, then yeah, the grants are per hereditament.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I do not believe this last question here. We have a rateable value of 20,000, but are not in the manufacturing sector. We do not supply essential goods. Do we qualify? So it was retail, leisure, and hospitality only that that they're available for. Excuse me.
Yeah, for over anyone who's not receiving small business rates relief, the only other current coronavirus grants available for those retail, leisure, and hospitality, rateable value up to 51k. As I say, there's other support that's always worth looking into: the furloughing schemes, the support for self-employed individuals, and the other ones that I touched on in my presentation. Do take a look at those if you're in need. But in terms of the coronavirus grant schemes, they're very much tied to business rates, and either that small business rates relief or retail, leisure, and hospitality at present.
Excellent. Yes. Okay. So if this is a clarification here, saying car showrooms are classed as retail premises, so then you would be eligible for it theoretically.
Yeah, depending on their rateable value, as long as it's under 51k per hereditament, then yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, we're getting lots of messages of thanks, Henrietta, for your time this morning and for the information you provided. It's been very helpful and very informative. And I know that a lot of people have, a lot of questions, and it's understandable given the nature of where we are right now. But the councils are doing everything they can to provide as much support as possible for people. And the best way to get in touch with people is via the individual website of the individual councils.
It is indeed. Look at your local authority website. As I say, pretty much all of them now have online forms where you can submit your details. And even if you just think you might qualify for the small business rate relief grant or the retail, leisure, and hospitality sector one, do complete your details just to make sure that they've had them, so this could be brought through as quickly as possible for you. Excellent.
Well, that was very, very informative, and thank you very much for taking the time to join us this morning. It's very kind and much appreciated. yes, I think that will probably conclude our session for this morning.
Great. Thank you for having me along.
Thank you for joining us this morning, Henrietta.
Thank you.
Everyone.